It's been 10 years since I died. Ewart Chapman disposed of the body in the rainy night and went to the shop to buy a cake. I floated along with him, drifting back home. He cleaned himself up, sat down on the sofa, and carefully took out the cake, lighting the candles. The candlelight flickered, illuminating his handsome, lean face. "It's been 10 years since you left," Ewart said, looking at the cake with tender eyes. "Happy birthday, Audrey." Audrey was the name he had given me. Ewart had never been fond of sweets. In the past, whenever I craved a small cake, he would tease me for being childish. Now, as I leaned on the table, watching him devour the entire cake in big bites, I still felt my mouth watering with desire. "Bastard!" I gazed at him reproachfully, moving close to his ear to complain loudly, "Hey. It's my birthday cake, how come I didn't get a single bite?" Ewart remained oblivious, continuing to eat the frosting flowers. I suddenly remembered that I was dead, and he couldn't hear ghosts speak. "Fine, you can have it this time too," I grumbled, looking at the back of his hand. The person earlier had a switchblade, and Ewart had struggled to kill him, getting injured in the process. Now, a ghastly wound ran across the back of his hand, with blood eagerly seeping out, flowing down his arm and dripping onto the carpet. I raised my semi-transparent fingertip, gently touching his wound, and asked softly, "Silly Ewart, does it hurt?" Ewart didn't answer me, still focused on eating the cake. After swallowing the last bit of frosting, he went into the bedroom to fetch the new dress he had bought yesterday. I was overjoyed, spinning contentedly in midair. Another new dress to wear. Just as he came out of the bedroom, Ewart paused, then suddenly went back in. A moment later, he emerged with a pair of red dancing shoes, placing them in the metal basin as well. I was even more delighted, clinging to Ewart and repeating "you're so good" countless times. In the living room, Ewart set fire to the dress and shoes. As the flames consumed them inch by inch, the white dress appeared on my body, and the red dancing shoes fit snugly on my feet. I nodded with satisfaction, finally having shoes to wear after 10 years of bare feet. Ewart was careless, burning dresses for me every now and then, but always forgetting to burn a pair of shoes. Luckily, I was a ghost and could float around, otherwise walking would have been so tiring. I had loved these red dancing shoes 10 years ago, but Ewart had bought them and kept them by the bedside for 10 years, never letting me wear them. In the quiet night, he called my name, his voice calm and gentle, tinged with a hint of longing. He said, "Audrey, I won't burn any more dresses for you after this." I was about to whine and protest when I heard the sound of sirens in the distance. The neighborhood was surrounded by police cars, and many people came up the stairs, their guns aimed at Ewart. They had arrived. Ewart didn't resist at all. He was handcuffed and taken downstairs. I floated behind him, following him into the police car. We drifted all the way to the interrogation room. The older officer knew Ewart. He took out a photograph with a complex expression and placed it in front of Ewart. "What exactly was your relationship with her?" Ewart silently looked at the photograph for a long time without speaking. After a while, he smiled, his eyes full of honesty. "Detective Hayward, we had no relationship at all." "Liar!" The young, unfamiliar officer slammed his hand on the table, dissatisfied with Ewart's attitude. "If you had no relationship, then why did you kill those 5 people? He wasn't lying. I silently leaned on Ewart's shoulder, looking through the void at the 18-year-old me in the photograph. I had left too early. So early that we never had the chance to become lovers. Meredith and Ewart, our story began on a sunny afternoon 12 years ago. At that time, I was practicing ballet in the dance studio, sweating profusely. As I bent down, I caught a glimpse through the floor-to-ceiling windows on the second floor of a tall, quiet young man collecting scrap. He stood there covered in dust, but his gaze towards me was clear and bright. Truth be told, I had seen him many times before. But on that particular afternoon, I decided to go downstairs for the first time. Still wearing my ballet shoes, I approached him and extended my right hand, tilting my head as I looked at him. "Hello, I'm Meredith Yardley." Seemingly surprised by my approach, Ewart froze for a few seconds. When he came to his senses, he instinctively rubbed his hand vigorously on his clothes several times before gently grasping my hand, releasing it almost immediately. "Hello, Ewart Chapman," he blurted out, forgetting to use "I'm" in his excitement and nervousness. His awkward behavior made me chuckle, which only seemed to fluster him more. A warm breeze blew by as I tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear, looking at him curiously. Does this mean we know each other now? Ewart smiled too, nodding firmly. Of course. Now that we knew each other, we were friends. I looked up, meeting his honest and sincere eyes, and we shared a smile in the sunlight. And so our story began that spring. A ballet dancer met a young man collecting scrap. On a sunny afternoon, the girl walked down the stairs, and the light fell upon the young man. They shook hands solemnly, both deciding to become friends. That day, we sat under the big tree for a long time. Ewart told me he was an orphan, adopted by a scrap-collecting grandfather who had managed to send him to secondary school through his hard work. The grandfather was getting old, and the young lad had taken over the job of collecting scrap. As soon as I earn enough money, I'll take Granddad to the hospital for a checkup. Ewart's profile was sweaty, his eyes shining brightly. He sat a bit far from me. He didn't think collecting scrap was shameful, but he didn't want to dirty my white dress. You're amazing. I rested my chin on my hands, thinking Ewart was truly incredible. Not only are your grades good, but you can also support yourself. In comparison, I felt like a freeloader at home. Hearing this, a hint of shyness appeared on Ewart's youthful, handsome face. He scratched his head and said modestly, "It's nothing, I'm just a scrap collector." But Ewart, you won't always be collecting scrap, I said, looking into his eyes earnestly. I think someone like you will succeed at whatever you do. Ewart was amused by my words. He nodded seriously, I think, you're quite right. We laughed together, and after the laughter subsided, I couldn't help but sigh. You always come first in exams. I looked at him, full of admiration, and couldn't help but remark, if only I could always come first in dancing like you do in studies. You already dance beautifully. Seeing my mood drop, Ewart awkwardly tried to comfort me. Really, you dance so well. But dancing beautifully and dancing well are two different things. I sat down beside him, feeling dejected. Besides, I don't even dance that beautifully. Ewart was sweating with anxiety. He wasn't very good at comforting people, so after a long struggle, he managed to say, "It's all right, in my heart, you're always first. You're not Meredith, you're Audrey." My response was a burst of laughter. How silly he was, trying to comfort someone with what sounded like a bad joke. Ewart visibly relaxed. His skin had been tanned by the sun, giving him an inexplicably rustic and honest appearance. After laughing for a while, I finally stopped. Audrey, I repeated these two syllables softly, looking at the young man beside me with a serious expression. Ewart, I really like this name. Ewart flashed a shy yet bright smile, showing his white teeth. Then I'll call you Audrey from now on, okay? The setting sun shone on him, his eyes clear and pure. I nodded gently and said, okay. Later, I told Ewart that I was actually a rainbow baby. From a young age, I knew that my parents were nearly 20 years older than the parents of my classmates. I once had an older sister. She was intelligent and beautiful, skilled at dancing, but when she was 18, my sister fell gravely ill. Before she died, she said, "Mom, Dad, have another child." So 2 years later, I was born. I was a repetition and continuation of my sister's life. She was the because, I was the therefore. Because my sister was called Meredith Yardley, I was also called Meredith Yardley. Because my sister had long hair, I also had to keep long hair. Because my sister didn't have a beauty mark at the corner of her eye, I couldn't keep the one at the corner of mine either. It was the same with dancing. Actually, I didn't have much talent for dancing, but because my sister was good at it, I was also sent to the dance studio to learn ballet, which my sister loved most. Dad said Mum was ill, and only if I became my sister would she get better. So I could only be Meredith. I understood, so whenever I returned home, I carefully played the role of my sister. But I was a substandard product. I wasn't as smart as my sister, nor as pretty as her, and I certainly wasn't as naturally gifted at dancing as she had been from a young age. I didn't like the food my sister liked, nor did I like the colors she preferred. She was calm, while I was lively. My sister and I were always two different people. These flaws were often noticed by my observant mother. Whenever she realized I wasn't her Meredith, she would suddenly break down in tears. She would push me away in terror, shaking her head frantically. "You're not Meredith, you're not my Meredith." "Where's my Meredith?" "Darling, where's our Meredith?" Dad was disappointed. He'd say, "Meredith, why can't you try a little harder? Try a little harder, and you could be a bit more like your sister." I knew Dad was struggling. Back then, treating my sister's illness had used up all the family's savings. Mom's mental state meant she couldn't go out to work, she could only stay at home, and sending me to learn dancing was another significant expense. With his busy work, Dad's hair had turned gray early. I didn't want to disappoint him, so I tried very hard to become my sister, but later I found out that I couldn't do it. I was a stupid child. I could never become my sister. For 16 years, I had been trapped in a cocoon called Meredith Yardley, unable to break free. Until Yiyi appeared, smiling and calling me Audrey. A crack appeared in my stifling world. My school was in the East End of London, while Yiyi Chapman's was in the West End. As such, meeting under the big oak tree in Hyde Park on weekends became our unspoken agreement. Every Saturday and Sunday, both of us would be quite busy. I'd be in the dance studio, stretching and twirling, while he'd be out collecting recyclables to sell for money. He'd always wait for me by that oak tree after my class, as we'd promised to have lunch together. Dancing required weight control, so my mum treated me like my older sister, preparing small portions of food, always the dishes my sister preferred. I was allergic to mushrooms, yet they were always present in my lunchbox. I'd pass the mushrooms to Yiyi, eyeing the potatoes in his box enviously. Yiyi would silently eat all the mushrooms. Later, his lunchbox was always packed full. He'd take all the vegetables I disliked and share his own cooking with me. Children from poor families grow up fast. Yiyi seemed capable of everything, earning money to support himself, always coming first in exams, and even cooking delicious meals. At first, I felt awkward, but as we grew closer, I started to snatch potatoes from his lunchbox, brazenly making demands. "Yiyi, I want potatoes again next week." The good-natured Yiyi would agree almost immediately, wondering how anyone could be so fond of potatoes. "Won't you get tired of eating the same thing?" "Of course not," I said earnestly, resting my chin on my hands. "When I like something, I like it forever. I never get bored." Yiyi just smiled at me, looking rather silly. He sat closer to me than before, and I could clearly see his long eyelashes and clear eyes. Collecting recyclables was hard work. Yiyi often worked up a sweat, covered in dust, but he didn't want to come to lunch with me looking messy. So he'd always change into clean clothes before I finished class. It was a strange sense of ceremony, but I loved it. Just like how I'd always bring a lemon sweet to secretly slip into his pocket every time we met. I thought Yiyi had eaten all those sweets, but after I became a ghost, I discovered he hadn't eaten a single one. He'd kept them all, stored in a beautiful glass jar. When he missed me terribly, he'd open the jar, pour out the sweets, count them several times, and then put them back. He was always like that. Such a clever person, yet always doing silly things. I'll always remember young Yiyi, holding his lunchbox, his gaze cautious, awkward and nervous as he said to me, "Audrey, have some of mine. I've washed the box several times, it's not dirty." At the time, I felt a strange tightness in my chest, an indescribable feeling. It wasn't until I saw Yiyi counting the sweets that I understood. That tight feeling was called heartache. After the summer term ended, Yiyi Chapman started working at the roadside cafe. Perhaps understanding that I could never catch up to my sister, Dad had stopped expecting me to achieve anything in dancing. However, because Mom still believed in preparing lunch for my dancing sister, he continued to insist on taking me to dance lessons. The twice-weekly dance classes became 4 times a week, and I spent the entire summer holiday shuttling between home and the dance studio. Yiyi and I still had lunch together. But since the roadside cafe started operating from noon until 2 or 3 in the morning, Yiyi's sleep schedule became completely reversed. Our lunch became his breakfast. Yiyi was always punctual, never late. Often, as soon as my class ended, he would already be standing under the tree with his lunchbox. As the summer holiday was coming to an end, I told him that I had finally genuinely started to enjoy dancing. Without the constant pressure of having to be the best, dancing had become a particularly relaxing and joyful activity. As I said this, I even did a little twirl in front of him. I chattered on for quite a while, and Yiyi listened attentively, his eyes shining brightly. I sat back down next to him and tilted my head to look at him. What about you? Ewart, how are you doing? Ewart looked at me and suddenly smiled. I'm doing well, Audrey. Thank you for asking. How well is well? I wasn't quite satisfied with his answer and puffed out my cheeks. This is an essay question, Mr. Chapman. Please elaborate on your well in detail. Ewart laughed at my teasing. He thought carefully for a moment before answering. He said the roadside cafe was very close to the dance studio, so he could have lunch with me, which made him happy. He also mentioned that the owner was very kind. Knowing about his difficult family situation, the owner told him he could continue to help out even after school started, with hourly pay, so he wouldn't have to go scavenging anymore. He added that his grandfather's health had improved significantly and no longer needed to take medication. He planned to take his grandfather for a checkup before school started. Ewart said many things. As I quietly looked at his profile, I suddenly realized he had become much darker. And when he stood up to leave, I found that even standing on the steps, I still had to look up to see him. In places I couldn't see, the young man was growing secretly and rapidly, his features slowly being carved into an adult's appearance by time. The hardships of life hadn't defeated Ewart, instead, they had made him stronger, braver, and more mature. This was a good thing. I watched his retreating figure through the floor-to-ceiling window, suddenly feeling very happy, but also finding it quite natural. Ewart should be like this. He was just that impressive. A classmate who practiced dance with me saw me and teased, "Off to have lunch with your little tramp again?" He's not a tramp, I turned to her and said seriously. He scavenges to support himself. Ewart was far from being a tramp. He was capable of anything. The owner of the roadside cafe kept his word. After school started, he really let Ewart help out. Not only did he provide meals, but he also paid a very good hourly rate. Because of this income, Ewart's life became much easier. He finally didn't have to go scavenging anymore, and he finally agreed to walk side by side with me. I knew Ewart wasn't actually insecure, but in front of me, he always put himself down. Before, when he walked me home, he would always follow at a distance, watching from afar as I entered the building before leaving. He didn't mind others calling him a tramp or scavenger, but he couldn't accept people associating these words with me. He cherished my reputation more than I did myself. The young man had always been protecting me in his own way. He hoped I would always be the pure white swan in the lake. I knew all of this. I knew everything. So I also wanted to use my own way to tell Ewart that whether he was scavenging or washing dishes, I would always think he was amazing. Earning money with his own hands was nothing to be ashamed of. And I was very willing to learn about everything related to him. So I pestered Ewart for a long time, insisting that he take me to the roadside cafe. He had no choice but to agree. On the last day of the summer bank holiday weekend, I finally met the supposedly kind owner. The owner was in his 30s, with a big belly, but he cooked very well. When he saw me, he looked at Ewart with a knowing smile. "Oh, and who might this be?" Ewart mumbled, "My friend." The owner nodded, letting out an "oh" as if suddenly understanding. He teased, "I see, girlfriend, right?" "No." Ewart's ear tips turned red as he glared at the owner in annoyance. "I said she's a friend." "She's still young, don't say such nonsense." The owner shrugged noncommittally and sauntered back to the kitchen. Ewart led me to a table, wiping it down again and again with a cloth until the surface was gleaming before he finally stopped. "Audrey, please sit." Ewart looked at me somewhat shyly. He was holding a cloth and wearing an apron, looking strangely domesticated and docile. Because of his tall stature, the cloth and apron seemed particularly small on him. I held back a laugh and took out my homework from my bag. Ewart scratched his head, and seeing me start on my homework, he walked to the side and began working. There weren't many people eating in the afternoon, so it was mainly preparation work. Ewart put on rubber gloves, sat down in front of a large metal basin, and reached out with his long arms to start scrubbing plates and washing dishes. His movements were quick and efficient, and in no time, he had cleaned a whole basin of dishes spotless. Seeing him start to sort and wash vegetables, I tossed aside my half-finished worksheet and bounced over to his side. Ewart was working up a sweat. He looked up and saw me, asking puzzlingly, is there a question you don't understand, Audrey? No, I squatted down beside him, looking at him with bright eyes. I'm here to help you. Yuert's hand paused as he was sorting vegetables. He looked at me, his eyes revealing a warm smile as he gently but firmly refused my offer. Yuert said, Audrey, you shouldn't be doing these things. When the young man smiled, a small dimple always appeared on the left corner of his mouth, filled with all the sunshine and coolness in the world. His features were becoming increasingly handsome, starting to show a maturity between adolescence and adulthood. Yuert was growing up so fast. I understood his stubbornness, so I obediently went back to the table and continued working on my worksheet. I would do some questions, then look at Yuert for a while. Feeling my gaze, Yuert's movements became slower and slower, and his ear tips grew redder and redder. Finally, he simply moved his small stool to a different spot and sat down with his back to me. Stingy Yuert! I complained in a tiny voice. Won't even let me look. Yuert's back stiffened, and I quickly lowered my head guiltily, pretending to be seriously reading the questions. Damn, how could his ears be so sharp? Later, I became a regular at the roadside cafe. The owner often let Yuert bring me there for free meals, and occasionally he would even cook a special dish to nourish us. But most of the time, the food I ate was made by Yuert himself. Every time the owner saw this, he would grumble that Yuert was a little rascal. My place is clean, you know. You've never had an upset stomach before. As I watched Yuert's busy figure, I couldn't help but marvel at how good-natured he was. What if someone bullied him? For some reason, just thinking about Yuert being bullied made me very worried and a bit angry. But I soon discovered that I was completely worrying for nothing. That afternoon, a group of rowdy lads with bleached hair came into the roadside cafe, ordering half the menu and keeping the owner and Yuert Chapman run off their feet. I was doing my homework when I suddenly felt someone standing beside me. Looking up, I saw it was one of the troublemakers. He had a cocky grin and leered at me, grabbing my arm to pull me towards their table. All alone, love? Come on, have a drink with us. I frowned in disgust, yanking my arm away. At the same moment, Yuert rushed over, wrapping his arm around me protectively and pulling me behind him. The lout shoved Yuert, but finding him immovable, he flew into a rage and threw a punch. Bloody hell, you asking for it? Yuert blocked the punch and started fighting back. Seeing the other lads getting up, the cafe owner quickly pushed me inside, grabbed a frying pan, and joined the fray. I watched fearfully and helplessly as they fought, my eyes fixed on Yuert. I saw a side of him I'd never seen before. The Yuert I knew was always sincere, gentle, shy, and good-natured. I believed him to be a poor little lamb, but the Yuert before me now was as fierce as a wolf. I had never seen him so violent before. His eyes were cold as ice as he threw punch after punch. Though it was 1 against 3, he wasn't losing ground. Before long, the troublemakers were all groaning on the floor. Yuert didn't stop. He had the lad who'd grabbed me pinned to the ground, blood seeping from his split lip. He was fighting as if his life depended on it. The owner, having dealt with the others, shouted sternly, Yuert. I snapped out of it and rushed to Yuert's side to stop him. As I grabbed his arm, tears suddenly sprang to my eyes. I cried out, Stop it, Yuert. You'll end up in jail. They weren't worth it, not worth tarnishing his innocence. Hearing my sobs, Yuert came to his senses. He was breathing heavily as he stopped and turned to look at me, immediately becoming flustered. Don't cry, Audrey, he said, clumsily wiping away my tears, his words becoming uncertain. It's all right, Audrey, don't be scared. I'm here. I looked at the scrapes on his face and sniffled, Yuert, does it hurt? Yuert shook his head vigorously. No, it doesn't hurt at all. Liar! Seeing his clumsy, dazed expression, I felt overwhelmed with sadness. I couldn't hold back my tears and kept calling his name, Yuert. How much had he suffered before? Before I knew him, before he had the strength to fight back, how many times had he been bullied? The owner chased off the troublemakers and tossed Yuert a bottle of iodine, waving his hand as if the sight pained him. Bloody hell, are we filming a soap opera in broad daylight? Yuert's body temperature was high, the warmth seeping through his clothes onto my face. I finally released him and took the iodine from his hand, pulling him by the arm towards the back room. The boy who had been so fierce moments ago now followed me like a shy bride, his face red as he sat down obediently on a chair inside. I gestured at him with my chin. "Take off your shirt." "What?" Eward's face turned completely red, and he waved his hands frantically. No, Audrey, you can't." "Pfft, what are you thinking, Eward?" I burst out laughing at his innocent reaction, holding my stomach as I doubled over. "I meant take off your shirt so I can treat your arm." During the fight, one of the louts had swung a chair at him, which Eward had blocked with his arm. Though the chair was plastic, such force would surely have left a bruise. Hearing my explanation, Eward froze for a moment. His eyes were watery, looking utterly pitiful. The little lamb Eward obediently took off his outer shirt, revealing an old, well-worn vest that hugged his body, which had become quite muscular from his work. It was a powerful and beautiful sight. Seeing the bruises and wounds on his face and body, I belatedly felt angry. My hand holding the cotton swab unconsciously began to apply more pressure. "Ouch," Eward inhaled sharply, looking at me pitifully. "That hurts, Audrey." "It doesn't hurt, not at all," I mimicked his words sarcastically, but my touch became much gentler. "I thought you were made of iron and couldn't feel pain." Eward fell silent, just smiling at me. After I finished applying the medicine, he lowered his eyes and said softly, "I'm sorry, Audrey. I won't fight again." "This idiot!" I was furious. Did he intend to just stand there and let them beat him? But the next moment, my anger turned to concern. I cupped his face in my hands and looked at him very, very seriously. "It's not that you can't fight, but you shouldn't hurt yourself. Because it pains me to see you hurt." Ewart was stunned for a few seconds, then suddenly smiled. He solemnly promised me that if he ever encountered such a situation again, he would definitely protect himself. My mood finally improved. Ewart Chapman's birthday is in early November, while mine falls at the end of December. He grows so quickly. Though he's only 2 months older than me, he's much taller now. When we first met, I was just a bit shorter than his shoulder, but now I only reach his chest. It's so unfair. I stand on the steps, looking at him under the tree. It's deep winter, and Ewart has finally put on his winter coat. He has very few clothes, always rotating between the same 2 outfits. For teenagers like us, poverty is an insurmountable mountain. There are so many things we need money for, and even though Ewart has earned quite a bit with his own hands, it's still just a drop in the ocean. I always tell him, "Ewart, please take care of yourself. Won't you look after yourself a bit?" He always says yes, but the next time I see him, he's still the same. Stingy Ewart, he won't buy himself a pair of 3-pound gloves, but he'll buy the best medicine for his grandfather and a 15-pound cupcake from the street corner for me. "Audrey is still a child, and children like cakes," he says, holding the cupcake in one hand while tapping my forehead with the other. His beautiful, slender fingers are red from the cold wind. "Happy birthday, Audrey." I take out a pair of gloves from behind my back, feeling very proud. "Look, I knitted these gloves for you, by hand. To make these gloves, I even unraveled a Beanie Baby." Ewart accepts the gloves in a daze. He's wearing his cream-colored satchel, looking incredibly docile and a bit silly. The satchel was my birthday gift to him. The moment the milky little bag was on tall Ewart's back, I burst out laughing. It looked so strange, yet so adorable. Back then he said, "Audrey, don't buy me any more bags in the future." I asked him why. He firmly told me, "I'll take very good care of it, so one is enough." Now he looks at the gloves and says the same thing, "Audrey, don't knit any more gloves in the future." Why? I ask teasingly as I take the cupcake, unwrap it, and look at him. "Because you'll take very good care of them, so one pair is enough?" "No," Ewart says, looking down at me and speaking softly, "because Audrey got hurt." I look at my hands. Oh, he noticed. Suddenly I feel so upset. "Ewart," I look at him, on the verge of tears, my voice starting to choke. "Today is my birthday, but Mom and Dad don't even remember. Mom and Dad only remember Meredith's birthday. But I'm not Meredith. I used to wonder when they would finally notice me behind my sister. Now, looking at the cupcake in my hand, I realize that although I still feel a bit upset and hurt, I'm not as eager for their love as I used to be. Perhaps it's because my light has appeared. Yurt says I'm his sun, but actually, he's my moon too. In the vast universe, the sun illuminates the moon, and the moon generously reflects the sun's light. He and I also shine brightly in each other's eyes. Make a wish, Audrey, Yurt's gentle voice comes to me. I close my eyes, put my hands together, and make my 17th birthday wish in my heart. May Audrey and Yurt never be apart. Yurt says he feels everything is getting better. He used to feel it was very hard sometimes, but after meeting me, he started to feel lucky. I bounce and skip beside him, occasionally standing on tiptoes to spin around. Hearing him say this, I finally stop for a moment. See, I told you. I point at the fireworks bursting in the distance, touching his chin and saying seriously, Yurt, you'll get luckier and luckier in the future. Yurt nods with a smiling, I believe you, Audrey. We've reached the residential area. Yurt watches me walk into the apartment building. I'm halfway there when I suddenly turn back, run to him, and say with a beaming smile, Yurt, spring is almost here. Spring has arrived, and everything is bound to get better. Just like last spring, when you met me, and I met you. This year, spring came early. The good news is, I'm still at the dance studio, waiting for Yurt Chapman to join me for lunch. Since he no longer has to scavenge, Yurt has become much fairer. And I've discovered that besides cooking, earning money, and studying, he's also incredibly talented at drawing. With just a piece of charcoal, he can sketch my dancing form effortlessly. Once again, I realize that Yurt is capable of anything. There's nothing in this world he can't do. When Yurt hears this, he just smiles. He tosses away the charcoal, and rather than dwelling on his exceptional artistic talent, he's more concerned about what I'd like to eat the next time we meet. Time flies like an arrow, and in the blink of an eye, summer has arrived. Halfway through our time at secondary school, we all need to start thinking about what path we want to take in the future. I ponder for a moment and realize that apart from dancing, I don't seem to be good at anything else. Am I terribly rubbish, Yurt? I ask, dejected. But it's only for a moment. I quickly perk up and look at Yurt with enthusiasm. What about you? Yurt, what do you want to do in the future? I'm going to become a businessman and earn lots and lots of money, Yurt says without hesitation. As if he's thought about this answer countless times. With the money, I'll provide for Granddad in his old age and send Audrey to dance lessons. Granddad and Audrey, but what about Yurt? Silly Yurt, I say. I open his hand and press my face tightly against his palm, looking at him almost pleadingly. Be good to yourself, Yurt. Please, be a little kinder to yourself, just a bit more. Yurt smiles gently and says, Audrey, I'm fine. His eyes are clean and bright, with a hint of contentment, as if to say that as long as Granddad and Audrey are well, Yurt is well. What a fool. Yurt is such a big fool. But it's this fool who's making my heart ache. Yurt, I've changed my mind, I say. I lift my face from his palm and give him a big smile. In the future, I want to earn lots and lots of money too. When I do, I'll send you to art school, buy you clothes, and take you to many, many places to travel. I promise you, I say, raising my hand and looking at him very seriously. I'll always be by your side. Do you believe me? The young man's gaze is gentler than moonlight. He says, I believe you, Audrey. How wonderful. Yurt is in my future, and I'm in his. We were still so young then, and in all our visions of the future, there was always him, always her. This, I suppose, is what love looks like in its earliest form. The first time Yurt and I held hands, I initiated it. I used the excuse that late autumn was too cold and grabbed his hand on the street. Yurt's face turned red, feeling as if everyone's eyes were on us. But even so, he didn't let go of my hand. However, Yurt is an extremely ritualistic person. He believes that holding hands, hugging, and kissing should all happen after a proper confession. So later, when I tried the same trick again, wanting to hold his hand once more, he wouldn't fall for it. Faced with the pure-hearted Yurt Chapman, I suddenly felt like being a little rebellious. So on his birthday, just as he closed his eyes to make a wish, I planted a light, gentle kiss on his cheek. Happy birthday, Ewart, I said. I hope each of your tomorrows will be happier than today. Ewart opened his eyes, looking very serious. Audrey, I'm 18 now. My eyes lit up, thinking he was about to confess to me. But after waiting for a while, he said to me, I'm an adult now, and Audrey is still a child. Children like cake, so my birthday cake is all for Audrey to eat. It wasn't until later that I understood what he wanted to say that day. When Audrey becomes an adult, I'll confess my feelings to you. Is that all right? There were still 2 months until my birthday. Ewart Chapman took on 3 jobs. He wanted to gift me a pair of red dancing shoes on my 18th birthday. A confession of love, you see. Just a small cake wouldn't do, would it? Ewart always said that he and I were from 2 different worlds. But that wasn't true. We were both ordinary people, struggling in the torrent of life, desperately striving for a better future. Even though we had tried so hard, fate seemed to play a cruel joke on us. My school was in East Borough, while Ewart's was in West Borough. Perhaps people who like each other are always in sync. I still remember my 18th birthday. It was a Friday, with heavy rain and a gloomy, damp atmosphere. In the evening, I got into a taxi heading to West Borough. I couldn't wait to see Ewart. I wanted to tell him that it was okay, I could confess to him too. But I didn't know that at the same time, Ewart was running from West Borough to East Borough, carrying a brand new, beautiful pair of red dancing shoes. And so, amidst the flow of people, we missed each other. Ewart and I only missed each other this once, but this one miss was for eternity. That taxi took me into a darkness I had never anticipated. After I got out of the car, a drunken madman on the street dragged me into a deserted lane. What was more terrifying was that there wasn't just one drunk person. Those filthy hands covered my mouth, their foul breath fell on me, and pain consumed all my senses. After those men left, I struggled to move my fingers, but all I could see was endless darkness. When I woke up again, I found myself standing beside Ewart. In the dim room, he was holding a pair of red dancing shoes, his bloodshot eyes fixed on the news playing on the television. On the screen, 5 middle-aged men had their faces heavily pixelated, while a girl lay naked, blood pooling beneath her, her face so badly cut that her original features were unrecognizable. I saw a small mole on her arm, a mole that even her parents didn't know about, but Ewart did. Who was she? Oh, it seemed to be me. I looked down and saw my semi-transparent self, only then did I hazily realize. I had died. I died on my 18th birthday, the day I was about to become an adult. Look, Ewart, there really are ghosts in this world. But some people, some living people, they are more terrifying than ghosts. I'm so scared, Ewart. Can you hold me? In the first year after my death, Ewart Chapman threw himself into his studies with a manic intensity. That year, he achieved the highest A-level results in the county, but instead of pursuing business as he had originally planned, he opted for law. Ewart abandoned his ambition to become a businessman. In his diary, he wrote my name countless times, saying, "Audrey, I will seek justice for you." This drastic change was due to the fact that the 5 individuals who should have received life sentences mysteriously had their sentences reduced to 10 years as the incident gradually faded from public memory. Then, inexplicably, their sentences were further reduced. I followed Ewart to university. He had changed so much. The once warm and cheerful young man had become gloomy and aloof. His academic performance was always top of the class, yet he remained solitary, coming and going alone. He rented a tiny flat off campus, barely large enough for a bed. At the bedside stood a pair of red ballet shoes and a jar of sweets. On the wall hung a small handbag containing a pair of gloves. 1 year and 8 months. Besides these, all I had left him was one embrace, one moment of holding hands, and that feather-light kiss on his cheek. I never even had the chance to tell him I fancied him. In this cramped space, Ewart slowly grew into a capable adult. He often counted the sweets and talked to the red ballet shoes. When sleeping, he would rest his head on the handbag and clutch the gloves. He secretly visited my parents. Dad had aged considerably, but perhaps because he hadn't loved me as much, he and Mum weren't as devastated by my death as they had been when my sister passed away. I also saw my sister, elegant and beautiful. She lingered near Mom and Dad, reluctant to leave. We gazed at each other from across a window. In my sister's eyes, I saw guilt, helplessness, and love. Suddenly, I understood that souls survive on love. They linger near those who love them most. So, without hesitation, I followed Ewert. 5 years after my death, Ewert began his master's degree. He had become an exemplary young man, always polite, knowledgeable, and capable. He hadn't celebrated his birthday for years but often bought me pretty dresses. I would skip along behind him, my ethereal skirts blooming like soft white flowers. 7 years after my death, Ewert had become an accomplished solicitor. He had reviewed the files related to my case countless times. That year, his grandfather passed away. On the street, Ewert saw a familiar face. The man was holding his little granddaughter, smiling benevolently and contentedly. He looked so happy, as if all the world's blessings had been bestowed upon him. As for me, even though 10 years had passed, seeing that face again made me, now a ghost, tremble uncontrollably. Ewert calmly returned home, burned a beautiful dress for me during the Guy Fawkes night bonfire, and ate all the lemon sweets in the glass jar. He said, "Audrey, I'm going to become a bad person." I had long known that Ewert was capable of anything. If he wanted to do something, he would surely succeed. Even if it meant murder, he could do it efficiently. And so Ewert Chapman began a meticulous 3-year plan. On the 10th anniversary of my death, 2 months before my birthday, Ewert exacted his revenge, inflicting upon those 5 individuals the same injuries I had suffered. 27 knife wounds, a scarred face, a broken arm. This was a revenge, 10 years in the making. After dealing with the last person, Ewert called the police. Having ended the call, he disposed of the body in the rainy night and went to a shop to buy a cake. I floated along with him, drifting back home. I watched as he cleaned himself up, sat down on the sofa, and carefully took out the cake, lighting the candles. The candlelight flickered, illuminating his handsome, gaunt face. "It's been 10 years since you left," Ewert said, gazing at the cake with tender eyes. "Happy birthday, Audrey. You'd be 10 this year, probably in year 5 now. I'm sure you'd ace English, but maths might be a struggle. You always hated maths, falling asleep whenever I tried to explain problems. Don't eat too many chips, you're still growing. There's no nutrition in chips, and you might not grow tall enough, then you'd be upset again. I know Audrey's like a little swan, but don't hop and skip when crossing the road. I'm not there to watch over you, so you need to mind the traffic lights yourself, all right? Our Audrey, always the most beautiful when dancing." Ewert rambled on and on. I watched him, feeling suffocated with sorrow. "Silly Ewert, you fool. I'm begging you, please take care of yourself. Ewert, won't you look after yourself, please?" Outside, police sirens wailed. Ewert shouldered the old satchel, put on those gloves, and waited quietly. In the silence, he whispered softly, "I'm sorry, Audrey. I won't be able to burn an effigy for you on bonfire night next year. Chapman, you're a solicitor. You're knowingly breaking the law." In the interview room, the older detective looked at Ewert, who had just confessed his crimes, with a pained expression. "You have no connections, no influential friends. We all know how hard it's been for you to get where you are. It's been so many years, why can't you let it go? Connections? Influential friends?" Ewert smiled faintly, looking calmly at my photo. It was precisely these things that caused my Audrey to suffer such terrible injustice. Detective Hayward, I grew up in the poorest part of Bath, surrounded by insults and humiliation, raised to the sound of bastard and beggar. When I was 16, a ballet dancer came into my life. She said to me, "A rubbish collector, Ewert, you can do anything." She was like a flower, pure and soft, while my life was a muddy mess. But this flower was willing, even eager, to bloom in the muck. You know, she was truly beautiful when she danced. I wanted her to stay that beautiful forever. I bought red ballet shoes, waiting for her to grow up. But she died, in the cruelest way imaginable, on her 18th birthday. Ewert's eyes reddened, his voice trembling uncontrollably. "Detective Hayward, it was so close, really just a hair's breadth. I could have been the luckiest man in the world. I've always respected the law." Ewert didn't cry in the end. He never cried, no matter how upset he was. He just raised his reddened eyes, smiling at the distressed man across from him. Detective Hayward, I just felt that it couldn't be left like that. My eyes stung as I gazed at my forever bright and clean young man. Indeed, why should it be left like that? Can a simple "it's been so many years" erase all the harm that was done? Over these years, I've seen too many girls like me. In life and death, they continue to exist amidst others' malicious insults. She was dressed too provocatively, it's her fault for being too pretty. Who told her to go out late at night? It seems the reason for our misfortune is simply because we are women. How utterly unfair. Countless girls, countless us, dying one after another in the darkness before sunrise. I was dragged into a dark alley on my way home. You were chained and locked in a cellar. She was properly dressed eating street food when she was beaten and hospitalized. And there are more girls, examined coldly between their legs as soon as they're born. Those eyes, disappointed and angry, because they're not what they wanted. So these girls are sold, given away, thrown into roadside bushes, or simply drowned in chamber pots. Our lives were destroyed. Some have forgiven the perpetrators, but those who forgave are not us. How absurd it all is. Society constantly disciplines young women, using self-esteem and shame as the most effective needles to sew our mouths shut. So I don't speak, you don't speak, she doesn't speak. The world continues to be a paradise of birdsong and blooming flowers, of song and dance. We are sunflowers, all rotting in the ground. As time passes, everyone will forget, even refusing to believe that such terrible things ever happened in this world. It's all fake, all of it. He says, they say, that society clearly favors women. And then, the traces of our existence are smoothed away. But it shouldn't have been like this. When will people understand? Gender is not original sin. And we shouldn't leave everything to time. For the intentional and brutal murder of multiple people, Yiyi Chapman was, unsurprisingly, sentenced to death with immediate execution. As a lawyer, he had long anticipated this outcome. Yiyi had never changed. He was still that gentle, kind-hearted young man from years ago. Killing on that rainy night was something he had to do, as was turning himself into the police. For Yiyi, death wasn't torture, but release. So he calmly accepted the judgment of the law. During his final 7 days, Yiyi would look at the small handbag and gloves every day, speaking to them. They had been cherished all this time, so even after so many years, apart from the patina of age, they remained intact. Audrey, I miss you, he would say. It rains every year on your birthday. Are you thinking of me too? I rest my head gently on his shoulder and nod. Yes, I miss you too. Silly Yiyi, I think of you every day, not just on my birthday. Looking at the ghastly wounds on the back of his hand, I suddenly realized that I never told him I liked him, and neither did he. On the 7th day, Yiyi Chapman awaited his final judgment. The cold needle injected the drug into his body. My young love, he writhed in agony, his eyes gradually losing focus. 10 years had passed. In the last moment of his life, he finally saw me. Longing, grievance, joy, and pain, countless emotions flashed through his eyes, ultimately transforming into tears of happiness on his cheeks. I promise, I'll always be with you. Do you believe me? I believe you, Audrey. Silly boy, I never broke my promise. A gentle kiss fell, and I smiled tenderly. Yiyi, Easter is almost here. When Easter comes, everything will get better. Just like that Easter when Yiyi met Audrey at 16, the sun collided with the moon, and the vast universe burst into a dreamy, dazzling light. So, my dear boy, don't be afraid. I'll be waiting for you next Easter.